Good morning and welcome back to the KSMO Business Opportunity Exchange. We're so glad to have you here for our second corporate workshop. This session is for corporate members only, and it is brought to you by the Ball Corporation. Today's topic is supplier diversity, the path forward. And we have two very distinguished and well-versed guests. First, we have Marilyn Townsend, former CEO and chairman of Controlled Environmental Products. Maryland took over CEP in 1991. Once at the helm, the company moved from providing medical supplies to janitorial supplies and later added safety supplies. From supplying casinos, hospitals, and large industrial customers, Maryland turned CEP into a Tier 3 MBE firm with over $20 million in annual sales. With just over 30 years in the business, Marilyn decided to sell her business in 2021. Marilyn is no doubt a very astute business owner, and we were proud to have Marilyn as one of our distinguished MBEs for many years. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Marilyn Townsend. Next, we have for this particular panel, Supplier Diversity, the Path Forward, is Mr. John W. Rogers Jr. John is the chairman, co-CEO, and CIO of Ariel Investments, the global value-based asset management firm he founded in 1983. His professional accomplishments extend to the boardroom, where he is a member of the board of directors of McDonald's, Nike, and the New York Times Company. Mr. Rogers has one of the longest track records in the business. His flagship fund, Ariel Fund, is the only mid-cap value fund in the U.S. that dates back to 1986. He has been highlighted alongside legendary investors Warren Buffett, Sir John Templeton, and Ben Graham as one of the world's greatest investors. Mr. Rogers is known for his patient and contrarian investment philosophy, which uses the market's short-term focus to uncover mispriced companies whose true value will be realized over time. Ariel Investments is the nation's oldest African-American owned investment firm. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. John W. Rogers Jr. All right, we're going to begin this panel, which is focused on supplier diversity, the path forward. Again, this panel is brought to you by the Ball Corporation. Our aim today is to pull from the expertise of Mr. Rogers and Mrs. Townsend to share with you many insights on supplier diversity so that we may chart a real path forward in how we not only view supplier diversity, but how we enact our policies, guidelines, and processes to affect real change with minority business enterprise. With that, we'll begin.
I remember primarily Sandra Rand. I don't know if any of you know Sandra, but she was at United Airlines for a long time. And she made United understand that you needed to do business outside of the supply chain and use Black-owned professional services firms. And they used Black law firms, accounting firms, investment banking firms, and they hired us to manage part of their pension plan, and we're considering putting our mutual funds in their 401k plan. So I thank Sandra for her leadership, and there are many other examples of corporations that have worked with us over the years that are partners with all of you guys. The challenge, of course, we have is we got to make sure that even though it's called the National Supplier Development Council, we've got to make sure that professional services and financial services and technology-based companies get included also. And sometimes people cling to the traditional viewpoint and haven't evolved as the economy has evolved. And as you know, our economy, again, has just become so much of a professional services and financial services-based economy.
Awesome. Marilyn, from 1989 to 2021, you built a Tier 3 supply company specializing in medical and personal protective equipment. Supplies to hospitals and large-scale organizations. I would like you to take a moment to share how the NMSDC and the Supplier Diversity Initiative enabled your growth and expansion.
That's an easy one for me because it all started with the council. And at that time, we had a very large local council. And to participate in the different programs that the council espoused at that time. And in addition to the CEO executive level participation in the council, through the council, we could communicate whether we were having issues and getting responses back from the diversity people in the very local companies. And they would respond to our leadership that the suppliers were having trouble getting into the bids and so on, getting a phone call returned. And when you have that level of involvement, things happen because everybody expects to impress their upline. And if the very top is expecting to hear what's going on or what's not going on, they'll know why, because they'll check to see why their people aren't responding. But it was through the council and the cloud of the council that I was able to make the contacts I needed to just introduce myself and my company.
So it sounds like for both you and John that there was relationship and there was advocacy through that relationship that enabled your companies to grow.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can definitely say that.
Yeah, the advocacy at the company makes all the difference, because as soon as Sandra Rand left United Airlines, they never were interested in working with Black professional services firms again. They don't think that Black people are smart enough to do work at United. You need that advocate, someone who can sort of show the talent that's in our community and how much we bring to the party to be able to help them solve whatever issues they have. So advocacy is critical.
Very critical. And I think that's one thing that's missing today. I don't think we have the advocacy that we need to get to the next level.
So if I'm hearing correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like when an individual is in place that has a certain ideology and a certain places a certain value on minority-owned businesses and making sure that they're included, then our businesses are included. But if it's not a policy, or if it's not a part of the company's policy and just regular practices, then what you're suggesting to me is that it may not be a sustained effort.
Yes, I do believe that, and it comes from the very top down, and you have to inspect what you expect, and if you don't know that it's not happening. And then where do we go if we need help?
I think that's a really important point, and there's so many strong advocates I know, I'm sure, that are on the Zoom today and around the country. You need to have the access to the CEO suite. If not reporting to the CEO, at least have a working relationship with the CEO and hopefully the CFO. And ultimately, that'll make all the difference. Too many times, very talented supplier diversity professionals are buried in procurement somewhere, and they really don't have the impact that their talents deserve.
I agree. I agree with that.
And so, Marilyn, over time, your business, like others, experienced ups and downs in revenue due to various market conditions. But can you tell us how your business experienced downturns or obstacles as it relates to the mood or focus of supplier diversity efforts?
Well, I found that as the political climate changed in our country, the need or want for more diverse spend changed as well. And we were pretty much prepared for that, because the head of NMSDC at the time said to us, this isn't as pretty as it used to be. Everybody wanted to outdo the other guy in terms of their diverse spend. That was Harriet Michelle at the time. And we decided as a company to not have all of our eggs in one basket. We had everything, like you said, from the janitorial to the medical, to the laboratory science and clean rooms, and so on. So we had segments of our business so that if one was down, maybe we could move into the casino and hospitality industry to bring that level back. Some of the products are the same, and some are specific to medical. So we just had diversity among products and services. And we had to also make sure that we could offer something that our bigger competition, our billion-dollar competition, couldn't do. And you say, they've got the money, why not? Well, I'm local. And I have at least 1 to 2 months worth of products in my warehouse. So that if ABC Hospital calls and says, I need this, I have a patient on the table, what can you do for me? Within 20 minutes, they had it on their dock. The big guys can't respond that quickly. But we were able to do that. And I take great pride in that today, even.
So it sounds like your service, it sounds like your service was a clear differentiator in terms of your company and others. But John, I want to pivot to you on this particular question as well, because as we talk about downturns and obstacles, as it relates to the mood or focus on supply diversity efforts, I would imagine that when the personnel changed at United Airlines, that was a hit to your company to some extent in terms of losing that revenue.
Yeah, it was extraordinarily painful. And then you spend an enormous amount of time, trying to bring the business back, and it's basically a big charade. They pretend they care about Black businesses, and the CEO and the leadership says they care. But in reality, when the decisions are being made, there are no Black people talented enough. And I've talked to my peers in Chicago who have found United one of the most impossible firms to work with. People like Jim Reynolds and Luke Capel and others, we talk about this and how painful a situation it is. The other thing I find, you talk about different conditions during the financial crisis where a lot of us struggled, 2008 and 2009.
Oh,
that really showed you which companies were committed to working with diverse firms and which ones abandoned you in the middle of the financial crisis and really didn't care whether you survived or didn't survive. So that was a testament to which were the true believers in working with minority businesses, is how they handled us during that financial crisis.
those were rough days. I remember well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great observation there. I mean, because if we look at the time that we're living in now, where there's a lot of conversation about racism and race and politics and so forth, there are a lot of companies that have issued statements. But to your point, during one of the most critical times, what you're sharing with me is that one of the most critical economic challenges in that 2008-2009 crisis, that companies did not necessarily espouse this same make these same statements or whatnot in terms of their actions in doing business with MBEs. And so that is it's very telling, and sounds like that we just need to be aware of that history and keep that in mind as we move forward. With that said, John, recently, you and I talked beforehand, and I shared with you that I had the pleasure of listening to you speak on supply diversity on the Roland Martin show. And you talked about a need to focus on tracking the specific spend in categories rather than the overall spend to create wealth and philanthropy within Black and Brown communities. What does this really look like in 2021?
Well, an example of where it's really been done well, I know we all have good examples, but the University of Chicago, where I'm fortunate to be vice chairman of the board, they coined the term business diversity to signal to all the vice presidents and all the people that sign off on contracts that the university was open to do business with Black people in everything we do. Whether who your insurance broker is, who your real estate broker is, who your law firm is, who your accounting firm is, who your consulting firm is, who your investment banker. To have all those decision makers understand that it's not just the supplier diversity people that are responsible, the whole organization is responsible to do business with Black people and minority firms. And that is something that the university's done better than anyone else. They coined the term business diversity because they felt that would, again, signal clearly that that the university was open to do business with everyone. And so today they do business with over 95 professional services companies. They put a 2-day symposium together every year. The President Zimmer comes and speaks. We've had Michelle Obama by video. We've had the governor come and former Secretary of Education Arne Duncan come to celebrate the University of Chicago's efforts to do business with Black people and minority firms everywhere. And those 95 firms, when you come to the symposium, they have large pictures of each of the firms. And so it's sort of cool because that really shows you these are real firms doing real business. And I can still remember the head of WVON radio, our Black radio station, getting up one year and speaking about how if it wasn't for the University of Chicago advertising on her radio station, she would have had difficulty making payroll. Wow. And then seeing the head of the Black accounting firm who's been around forever, talking about having the University of Chicago as a client was leading them to get other university clients and other nonprofit clients. So I just say that to start with is we've got to make sure that we're signaling that you just cannot get away with anymore just doing business in a couple of narrow areas. Those are important areas. It's important to do this construction. It's important to do the catering. We deserve opportunities there. But the last thing I'll say, the profit margins in professional services are much higher. We have data from BCG and McKinsey that was done for our civic committee here in Chicago that shows that when you look at the top 14 categories of how money is spent in the Chicagoland area, professional services is number 1 with a profit margin of 5 to 20%. Construction is number 10 on the list with profit margins approximating 0. So we want to be in the highest margin parts of the spend where we can create real multi-generational wealth for our communities.
Yes.
Yeah, and Marilyn, I'm going to come to you in just a second, but John, I hear you speak specifically about Black-owned businesses as you're talking about MBEs or whatnot. What is the fuel behind keeping Black-owned businesses and brown businesses at the forefront of this conversation?
I think I had the privilege of growing up here in the South Side of Chicago, and at a time when Chicago was a mecca for Black businesses. And you saw the impact. We all know what John Johnson did for all of us with, Ebony and Jet and, everything from celebrating our lives, our success stories, to having Emmett Till, on the cover of the magazine at a critical time in the civil rights movement that helped change the trajectory of the civil rights movement. We know he had his fashion. You guys, many people are too young to remember his fashion shows for the United Negro College Fund. He was all in. Yeah. But then at the same time, you had a George Johnson who created Afro Sheen and Ultra Sheen, Johnson Products. Not only did these guys hire thousands of people, but George Johnson started Soul Train with Don Cornelius.
Wow.
He created Independence Bank that became the largest Black bank in the country. He prepaid 3 years of advertising in Essence when they were having trouble making payroll early in their careers. And then, by the way, from a philanthropic standpoint, he was responsible for 70 tables every year at our Urban League Gala. And when Dr. King came to Chicago, desperate to make, needed money for his payroll, George Johnson got all of his friends together to give him the needed funds at a critical time and made sure the Independence Bank loaned money to Dr. King at that critical moment. And then finally, he used Black accounting firms. He used my mom's law firm. He used Burrell Advertising. Mm-hmm. He was a one-person ecosystem that created wealth and jobs and philanthropy for our own community. That's why it's so important for us to have strong Black businesses if we care about equal economic opportunity in this country.
Wow. My mind is just blown with all of those examples that you gave, and I mean, just such rich information. And Marilyn, I saw you nodding your head. And I'm thinking about you as a Black woman, entrepreneur, establishing a business in an environment where it's few and far in between where you will see Black women or women of color at all in that particular industry. And John is describing a business diversity atmosphere or whatnot that was created there with the University of Chicago. And as I'm listening to that, and I'm thinking about these latter years of you being in business with CEP, how could that environment have really enriched your business even more?
Well, I recognized early that where we had advocates, Black-owned, I'm sorry, Black advocates within corporations, the medical community, the scientific community, we were able to take the first step. There was somebody interested in seeing us grow. They tested us, made sure we were ready, and once we got in the door to make our presentation, things started to move, because actually big business is always seemingly surprised that we are educated, that we are ready for the next step, next two steps, because they think, oh, we're just begging. Well, I resent that. I resented it then, I resent it now. And I know that the advocates who are really in there trying to make the case, I had to stand up for them so that they looked as good as we did. I couldn't let them go down saying they can't pick good companies. But I think, I don't know what it's going to take for the next step. In 30 years, we've been the only med-surg minority distributor. And there's no one coming behind us now. And I remembered when my partner and I decided we were going to do it. We educated ourselves and learned how the industry looks at small businesses and how you grow to another level. And they found that we had both the electronic systems for tracking, we had the inventory and the warehouse, we had the truck to make the deliveries. Shocked as they were, we found out we could do it. And then once we showed them we could do it, they had to explain why we weren't on their diversity list of companies they did business with. And unfortunately, there is no one in that area now. I had 30 lines of medical products at one time. And now it's down to how many janitorial products do you have on contract? But the actual needles and gauze and all of that, I don't have that anymore. And the bigger the med-surg distribution companies are, and it's in the billions of dollars a year per company, it's a situation where they make deals with these hospital conglomerates and they contract that they have the business sewn up for X number of years. Can't get in. And then if they find that they can get a better deal through us, that billion-dollar company has the right to bring their pricing down again once the customer has a price from us. Yeah, so, you know, that's going against the grain. Or they'll give me a due date for a bid, but my larger competition has 3 more weeks than I did. And I'm thinking, what are they doing? Sharing my bid? I never got a response on that.
Wow. So it sounds like both of you have described several different hurdles. One of those hurdles being that you, in your process, Marilyn, that you may not have as much time to bid. Then on top of that, your bid may actually be shared, and then the larger firm may have the opportunity to even lower their price, so that they can now outbid you, right? Or now
they just take over the business. Exactly.
Yeah, but I want to deal with that first hurdle that you talked about, which is, you know, having to, I'm going to say, audition or prove yourself. And I'm thinking about this for both you and for John with your firms, and how, how does it affect, or how do you believe it affected you or affects minority-owned businesses in having to constantly prove themselves, even though they may have the experience and capacity, but others aren't put through that, other small businesses aren't put through that same auditioning phase, if you will?
You know, when it comes to being the first, in the industry, I understand that. But the reason we're the first is because maybe we're the first to get an opportunity. There might have been others that wanted to get involved, but I had to prove I'm knowledgeable. I understand. I have the infrastructure to support the information, the products, you name it. I can provide the service, but we are so often left to have to prove it, even though they can see I have brick and mortar. I've got my own trucks. My name is on the truck. I have product. They'll still make you jump through those hoops that get bigger with time. And then it's sometimes like they have such a relationship with our larger competition that the competition is talking in the ear of that buyer, or that diversity person says, I can do more for you than they ever can. And so we stay at the bottom of that heap, because there's more feet stepping on us rather than helping to lift us up and get the opportunity. They have no idea the opportunity they have if they help to build us just by giving opportunities. We can win this. But there are some people that have incentive to not do that.
Gotcha. John, did you want to share on that point?
I'll follow up on the next question.
Okay. So John, you mentioned a few minutes ago about, some of our boards of directors, or that you're on a board. Well, we mentioned that you're on board of directors, but then there were other boards of directors or whatnot that are influencing policy. But oftentimes the conversation of economic justice is not even part of the discussion in those boardrooms. How do we ensure that economic justice is not only part of the conversation, but evolves into policy and practice?
Well, thank you. It's up to us. Those of us that are fortunate enough to be in the boardroom, we've got to fight for each other when we're in those boardrooms.
Yes.
As the late Congressman John Lewis said, if we have a responsibility to speak up and speak out if we see something that's not right, that's not just. We've got to make good trouble when we're in those boardrooms. So to help us do that, one of the things that Ariel did was about 18 years ago with Charles Tribbett from Russell Reynolds, we created a conference for African Americans that are on corporate boards, people who are on the largest corporate boards in the country. And now, this last several years, we typically had 200 directors come together. And part of it is socializing with each other, getting to know each other, because we've been having this opportunity, learn from each other how to be leaders in the boardroom. But third, learning how to lead around economic justice issues once you're in the boardroom. And so what we do every year at the conference is we have what we call the conscience of the conference on Friday night to remind us of those responsibilities. We've had John Lewis there. We've had Andy Young. We've had Reverend Jackson. We've had Reverend Sharpton. We've had Mark Morial, Valerie Jarrett. We had President Obama 2 years ago. People who understand the sacrifices that occurred during the civil rights movement to open up these doors for all of us. And again, we have a responsibility to speak up and speak out. And if we don't, nothing will change for our community. And we learn from each other how to do it effectively, because we don't just want to be in there throwing bombs and not making change either. There's ways of being able to argue your points, holding management teams accountable to live up the commitments they've made around diversity and inclusion. So we try to learn from each other. There's guys like Bruce Gordon, who was on the board of CBS. He's an expert at how to do that. And having people like that can help mentor the next generation of directors to, again, fight the good fight when they're in these leadership roles.
Awesome. Marilyn, in your 32 years of leading a successful business, you've seen the spectrum of changes around supplier diversity. From your perspective, what needs to happen now to bring about real inclusion and growth of minority business enterprise?
Well, I think, as always, we have got to be ready. We have got to be involved in every aspect of business. We are first our own advocates. We have to work with the corporate advocates. we have to make sure they are on their job and involved to help us get there. And don't be afraid to speak up if it's not happening. If it's happening for others, but not for you, have a conversation with someone so that they can understand, oh, we still have opportunities here. We're not opening the door for everyone, but why? If there's feedback that you need to do something else to be more palatable to these corporations, what is it? What can I do? If you've done it and they can't really give you any information, you don't know how many advocates I've heard, I can't ask that question. I need my job. That knife goes deep. So if you can't help me because you're afraid for your job, what do you think about me? I have my whole livelihood riding on the success or failure of my company. And we no longer have that top tier of corporate executives hands-on with us anymore, like we used to. And I think we have to show corporations that we need a higher level of executives involved with purchasing so that there is at least a dotted line to their diversity personnel. Now, I have some friends who've been around as long as I have that have tirelessly worked to change the vision of supplier diversity within major corporations. And then there are those that said, I need my job, rather than to speak up. They're there for themselves only and to protect their job and their paycheck. And that needs to change because it can happen to all of us at the same time. We can reach those successful levels without having someone feeling like they've been left out and they're more vulnerable because of it. That should not be.
Thank you. Thank you. And John, I'm going to pivot to you, with a similar question. You're part of the of the NAIC, National Association of Investment Companies. And, we know that you are one of the most successful mutual fund management firms and what have you. And forgive me if I'm not saying the proper terminology, but we also know that the NAIC is one of the most has some of the most successful investment companies, money managers in the country. But again, so, I would throw the same question back to you. What needs to happen now, to bring about real inclusion and growth of minority business enterprise, even in that financial professional services area that we so often or see little participation in?
Well, again, it comes back to us. And you mentioned the NAIC. It's an extraordinary organization, primarily made up by the African American and Latinx private equity firms, and includes people like Robert Smith, who, of course, built the largest private equity firm, Black-owned in the country, but many, many others that have been very, very successful. And when I talked to Bob Green, I think, telling your leadership is so impactful. We need to lead these guys who are literally becoming billionaires in private equity. It's such a lucrative industry. They're going to all be on all the local boards in every town that they're headquartered in. They're going to be on their university boards. They're going to be on the hospital boards. They're going to be on the museum boards. They're going to be, and then they control all the companies that they invest in. So they have impact directly and indirectly on how money's being spent throughout the United States. And these are the Black versions of KKR, which controls 1 million jobs and hundreds of companies. We in our community are going to be controlling hundreds of companies and millions of jobs as our private equity firms grow. So we have to make sure that we're living the values that we believe in and that we're pushing the white community to do. We've got to be doing it ourselves. And so I think that is critical. The NAIC can have such an impact on minority business development by making sure, again, all the companies that they take private and then maybe take public again are involved in, have Black board members, have Black leaders in the C-suite, and then do business with us in everything that they do. And then when they get on these nonprofit boards and corporate boards because of their leadership roles, to ask all the right questions there about business diversity and equal economic opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm gonna pose one more question. And while I'm doing that, those of you who are attending, we want to make sure that we hear from you. So feel free to put your questions in the chat. So John, you've shared that the term supplier diversity is 40 years out of date. How do we now define and organize the intent of this effort to bring wealth within disinvested communities?
Well, I've talked about this a lot already today. I just think we just need to borrow that term that the University of Chicago coined, business diversity, and just to signal to people that we are open for business in everything that the economy does. And it's just the reality. We can't deny it. As I gave you the data earlier from BCG and McKinsey, the #1 spend in the Chicago area is in professional services. Didn't make that up. That's what the data shows. Construction was number 10 out of 14, professional services 1 out of 14. When you just look around downtown Chicago, you look at the Aon Center, it's an insurance brokerage business. You look at the JP Morgan Chase building, it's a banking business. One of our most successful companies, Morningstar, is a technology and financial services company. You go down the list. That's where the wealth and jobs are created today. Our economy's moved from a manufacturing type of an economy to the one that I've talked about. And we just have to evolve with it if we want to really create wealth. Because like today in Chicago, if you look at the top 150 privately held companies in Chicago, according to Crain's Chicago Business, not one African-American company makes the top 150. 20 years ago, we had 3. We've gone backwards. And partly it's because I think we've trained all the progressive institutions to do business with us in only a narrow part of the economy. We're left out again where the wealth's created. And so guess what? We're getting further and further behind each and every year.
Wow. Marilyn, many companies, I've seen many companies that have been around 20 years, 30 years, but a lot of MBEs, when it comes to the end of their run with the business, they usually just shutter the business. You were fortunate. You were able to sell your business. And in fact, you sold your business to another MBE.
Yes.
What was the main driver for you to be able to do that?
Well, I wanted to make sure that another minority could come behind us with the reputation for products, services, as well as the relationships within the community, and pick up where we left off. And I didn't want somebody else coming along from ground zero trying to get started, because I can't tell you how difficult that is. And we were very fortunate, and it has worked out very well. And I told my people who are with the new company that I'm always there. If they need me to introduce them or to go along with them on calls, to speak on behalf of them, I'm there. They need somebody who will be a mentor. I didn't have a mentor. And with that, it's very difficult just to get going, particularly in certain product areas, such as the sciences, the medical, surgical, because that's almost like it has a big closed gate in front of you. And what it takes to get in that gate, I don't want anybody to have to start from ground zero just to walk through that gate. It's hard, and you need to be involved with organizations like the council. And I always tell people, as I did years ago, you've got to know the needs of your potential customer. You've got to know who knows the top in that industry in our city. And do you have advocates? You need to know them all. And I'm just always going to be there for any minority supplier that comes along looking to step through to get to the first step.
And Marilyn, at the height of your business, how many employees did you have?
We had about 15. And that was the gamut from sales, operations, warehouse, the computer area, doing more of the word processing type of things. And we felt we had to be one step or two steps in front of corporate Kansas City, corporate America, because a lot of companies didn't know what they needed to do in order to get to the next step and be prepared for future. And we would investigate, call on companies. We did business with a lot of minority companies that had insurance, that the finances, my 401k, you name it. We had big conversations with those people so we could plan. And to plan, you can get ahead of the curve and you can be ready. Whereas if you wait, you won't be ready and you'll be left out. That's one thing I learned very early.
Awesome, awesome. And so, you know, we're getting close to our time, but I want to make sure that we explore just one more set of questions here. And John, you know, I could talk about Marilyn's mentorship and her even reaching out or accepting the call of this little short guy some 12, 13 years ago to teach him something about supplier diversity. Now they end up working in the role of supplier diversity. But what is your company doing, John, in the area of mentorship with others in this space?
Well, what we've been able to do over the years, you know, we've been at this 38 years. And so we've mentored many African-American business leaders and entrepreneurs over that time frame, and got to know people at very young ages. I used to be very involved in recruiting minority students to Princeton. And as time's gone on, you know, we started the Ariel Community Academy, which is a small public school where we teach kids about the stock market and investing. So literally we're getting to get to know kids in 4th and 5th and 6th grade and talk to them about how to pick stocks, how to do research. They come down to our offices and, you know, see how we do our homework. They see people that look like them that are in the financial services industry. I'm meeting one of the young men tomorrow who is probably now getting close to 30, you know, Miles Gage, who I met in 5th grade, and he was Money Smart Kid of the Year with the Federal Reserve of Chicago. Now you'll see him on ads on NASDAQ, on CNBC advertising, working with NASDAQ on his Rapunzel app that helps teach the next generation investors how to invest. So we've had these types of programs where we're there to help get to know young people, mentor them over the years. Many of them work for us as summer interns or full-time employees. And then when you look at the, you know, some of our stars, just to mention some that I got to know Melody Hobson when she was 17 years old as a prospective Princeton student. And she was a summer intern at Ariel. She's now been with us 30 years, but you know, Melody's the chairman of Starbucks and was the chairman of DreamWorks Animation, on the board of JP Morgan Chase, and voted one of the most influential, 100 most influential people in the world by Time Magazine. And
Boy,
you know,
bravo.
so we really, well, thank you. And she's out there fighting for women and people of color in her leadership roles. And you know, the two top African Americans at Northern Trust Bank, the first two to ever get on the management committee of Northern Trust, started their careers as summer interns at Ariel, Shundron Thomas and Jason Tyler. So, and we could talk to many others that are doing really well out in the marketplace, but it's another reason why supporting Black businesses matter. And we create role models for next generation of leaders who will lead, hopefully, with the same spirit that we think is important.
Well, John and Marilyn, listen, I want to sincerely thank you for your time and thank you for sharing with our corporate members. You know, it's not often enough that we get to have this type of candid conversation and learn not only what some of the obstacles are, but also to learn what the solutions are. And I think both of you have done a phenomenal job of presenting, you know, what can be done to bring about equity and justice, economic empowerment. The Mountain Plains Minority Supplier Development Council, you know, we represent MBEs, ethnic minority-owned firms from that are owned by Hispanics, Indians, Asians, and Blacks. And so this conversation could not be more relevant right now and making sure that there is not only great representation, but that our voices are heard in such a way to influence policy, to influence real economic empowerment and the hiring or contracting with MBE owned businesses. So I'm truly grateful. And I learned so much. I've only had one good conversation, I'll say, with John or what have you, but I've talked with his team a lot, and he has a phenomenal team. Marilyn, I've talked with you quite a bit and have learned a lot from you as well. So we definitely appreciate it. I just want to say thank you so much and hope this has been beneficial to our corporate members.
I hope
Thank
so.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Great questions.
Thank you.